Some outboards you remember because they got you home. Others you remember because they almost made sure you didn't. On the showroom floor, they all look the same: clean cowlings, big numbers, trusted badges. But here's the twist. Buried under that shine are midsections that rot from the inside out, fuel systems that die the moment ethanol hits them, bargain brands with no parts support, and ex-rental workhorses that are completely worn out long before the decals start to fade. In this video, we're breaking down the outboards most likely to become engines of pure regret in 2026, from legendary models with hidden corrosion issues to cheap off-brand 20-30 horsepower motors and high-hour fleet engines disguised as deals. By the end, you'll know which problem years, designs, and too-good-to-be-true listings can quietly drain your wallet and ruin your weekends, and how to spot them before you hook up the trailer. Number 10. Yamaha 4-stroke F225 horsepower outboard of the early 2000s era. When this engine arrived, it felt like proof that big 4-stroke power had finally grown up. Quiet offshore runs, better fuel economy, less smoke. For a few years, the Yamaha F225 4-stroke was the dream motor on countless center consoles and walkarounds. Owners bragged about long-range trips, long trolling days, and the simple comfort of hearing a deep 4-stroke hum instead of an old 2-stroke bark. The weakness was not obvious at first. Buried deep inside the midsection, the dry exhaust housing sat in a harsh environment. Hot gases, salt spray, and constant thermal cycling. On paper, it looked acceptable. In real daily use, especially in warm salt water, that housing began to corrode from the inside out. The metal thinned. Pathways opened where there should have been solid material. The damage stayed hidden until it suddenly was not. Owners noticed the signs in different ways. A strange exhaust note. A hiss where the cowling used to be quiet. A gradual change in operating temperature that the gauge could not quite explain. Then came the teardown estimates, and with them, the sinking realization that the problem was not a simple gasket or sensor. Midsection work on a large 4-stroke is major surgery, and the bill matches. In 2026, these engines are long past their early years. Any F225 from that era has already lived a life, and whatever corrosion was going to start has had decades to grow. Some examples are still running well, and those will keep their legends. But many others sit one bad season away from a repair that costs more than the engine is worth. That is the kind of surprise that leaves owners wishing they had checked the production year and done more homework before falling in love with a nameplate. Number 9. Yamaha 4-stroke F115 horsepower first-generation outboard. On the surface, the Yamaha F115 4-stroke looks like the safest mid-range choice possible. It wears a respected badge, it is found on countless 17 to 19-foot boats, and later versions have excellent reputations. The trouble starts when you look at the earliest generation, built in the early 2000s, and talk to the mechanics who have opened them up. Head gasket failures began showing up long before some owners expected them. A bit of coolant where it should not be. A hint of white vapor on startup that was too easily blamed on cool air. Gradually soft compression in a cylinder that still seemed to be doing its job. None of these symptoms were dramatic on their own, which made them easy to ignore until the engine crossed a line and suddenly demanded real money. The fuel system added its own flavor of trouble. Early injectors and pumps were less tolerant of contaminated fuel and ethanol blends. A tank that had sat too long. A bit of water sneaking past a filter. A load of fuel from a marginal gas dock. For some engines, that was all it took to create hesitation at mid-range, stumbling under acceleration, or a hunting idle that never quite settled down. Owners swapped filters, cleaned lines, and replaced parts in a slow, expensive process of elimination. In 2026, the first-generation F115 engines are well into the stage where all of those early design compromises show up more frequently. The motors can be kept alive, and some run beautifully, but they often demand more patience and more money than their later descendants. Anyone shopping used because they heard Yamaha F115 is a reliable classic might end up discovering that not all production years are created equal. That realization, coming after the papers are signed, is where the regret sets in. Number 8. Mercury 115. Horsepower electronic fuel injected, 4-stroke of the mid-2000s. This engine became the default choice on a huge number of freshwater boats. Pontoons towing kids on tubes, aluminum fishing rigs crossing windy reservoirs, family boats doing a little of everything. On a test drive, the Mercury 115 4-stroke with electronic fuel injection seemed like a solid bet, smooth, quiet, and strong enough to move most mid-size hulls without complaint. The trouble lived inside the fuel supply module. That compact unit, tucked away and mostly ignored, had to handle fuel delivery, pressure regulation, and filtration while baking in engine room heat. Over time, pumps weakened, regulators drifted, and small internal filters clogged. The symptoms were infuriatingly inconsistent. Sometimes the motor would surge past mid-range without a hiccup. Other times it would stumble as soon as the throttle climbed much above a lazy cruise. Owners learned to dread a familiar pattern. The boat would run perfectly one day. The next day, on nearly identical water, the motor would refuse to rev past a certain point, triggering alarms and protests. Back at the dock or on the trailer with a garden hose, it would idle happily and tease everyone into thinking the problem had vanished. Diagnosing this kind of intermittent failure is slow and expensive. Some mechanics replaced only the suspect internal pump. Others recommended swapping the entire module to avoid chasing-related issues. And because the engine is common, the number of do-it-yourself fix attempts in the used market is high. By 2026, many of these motors have a history that includes partial repairs, improvised fixes, and uncertain fuel system integrity. For a buyer who simply wants reliable mid-range power on a family boat, stepping into that history without understanding it is a quick path to frustration. The name sounds safe. The real-world record is more complicated. That gap between expectation and reality is where regret tends to live. If you're thinking about an engine and wondering, does this one have a hidden problem? Drop it in the comments. I'll respond where I can, and there's a good chance someone else has already been there. Real stories and questions make this guide stronger, and your input might help someone dodge the exact mistake you saw coming. And if this breakdown is helping you think twice before buying, tap that like button and subscribe. It lets me know this kind of guide is worth continuing. Number 7. Yamaha 4-stroke F150 horsepower first-generation motor. For many boaters, the Yamaha F150 4-stroke is the gold standard of mid-range power. And in its refined later form, it deserves the reputation. But the earliest production years told a more complicated story, one that revolves around the balance shafts hidden inside the block. Those shafts spin opposite the crankshaft, canceling out vibration and creating that famously smooth feel at cruise. When the system works, you forget it exists. When it wears out, you cannot think about anything else. Worn bearings, misalignment, or failure inside the balance shaft assembly can turn a pleasant hum into a sharp, metallic clatter that sends a chill through even the most relaxed captain. The repair demands real labor. The engine must be opened up deeply enough to reach components that were never meant to be replaced casually. Some owners catch the issue early and fix it before collateral damage spreads. Others do not notice until more parts have been stressed than just the shafts themselves. Fuel system components on the early versions added another point of vulnerability. Weak, high-pressure pumps and aging sensors caused occasional stalling, starting issues, and erratic performance. None of these failures, taken alone, are rare or unforgivable in the life of a marine engine. But their combination, along with the balance shaft problem, means a first-generation F150 that has never had this work done carries an invisible question mark. By 2026, many of these engines are sitting right in the hour range where balance shaft and pump issues most often appear. For a buyer who only heard the praise for the F150 and never learned to distinguish years and internal generations, that engine on the back of a good used boat might look like a guarantee. In reality, it might be a very expensive question waiting for an answer. Number 6. Mercury 4-stroke, 40 to 60 horsepower, electronic fuel injection family of the early production years. In theory, these engines were aimed squarely at the sweet spot of boating. Not too big, not too small. Enough power for small pontoons, john boats, light center consoles, and utility rigs. Add electronic fuel injection, and the recipe should have produced a quiet, refined motor that handled everything from cold starts to changing altitudes with ease. Instead, early owners began reporting a specific set of behaviors. The engine would start easily and idle smoothly at the dock. Under gentle throttle, it would seem fine. But as soon as the boat was pushed harder, especially with a full crew or some chop, the motor might stumble. It could hesitate coming onto plane, bog under mid-throttle, or in some cases, simply shut down as though someone had turned off a switch. Fuel lines designed in the early stages of ethanol use did not always stand up to modern blends. Softening hoses shed particles that clogged screens and injectors. High-pressure components reacted badly to even small amounts of water or varnish. The electronic control unit did what it could, but sensors that had drifted out of their proper range sometimes fed it misleading information. Mechanics in marina shops began to recognize the pattern. Boaters, on the other hand, only saw a motor that embarrassed them at the ramp and ruined carefully planned weekends. They cleaned tanks, replaced filters, and swapped out fuel pumps, often restoring the engine for a while before some other aging component stepped in to continue the cycle. In 2026, many of the early 40 to 60 horsepower engines with electronic fuel injection have lived through more than one round of parts replacements. Some have been updated properly and run well. Others carry a maintenance history made of short-term fixes, bargain components, and wishful thinking. A buyer who sees a fuel-injected 4-stroke and assumes modern reliability may not realize that they are stepping into a version built before the learning curve smoothed out. Number 5. Outboard Marine Corporation, fuel-injected, clean hydrocarbon technology, direct injection. Outboards of the late 1990s. There was a moment when these engines looked like the future. Fuel-injected, clean hydrocarbon technology, better known now by its abbreviation, promised a way to keep two-stroke punch while dramatically reducing smoke and improving fuel economy. For boaters who loved the instant response of old carbureted motors but wanted cleaner operation, it sounded almost perfect. The reality was far rougher. Direct injection brought with it high pressures, tight tolerances, and electronics that had to manage everything in real time. Outboard Marine Corporation was under pressure, both from competitors and financially. Some engines were tested thoroughly. Others were pushed toward production before the design had fully matured. When problems appeared in the field injectors failing, detonation damaging pistons, controllers acting unpredictably, they did not arrive one at a time. They arrived in waves. Dealers tried to keep up. Software updates, injector replacements, warranty repairs on engines with only a few seasons behind them. Some owners received corrected versions and enjoyed years of good service. Others lost trust quickly and never regained it. The worst part came when Outboard Marine Corporation itself failed. With the manufacturer gone, parts support and institutional knowledge changed rapidly. Some aspects of the fuel-injected clean hydrocarbon technology system were carried forward in limited ways, but the original engines became difficult to support. Each passing year made them a riskier bet. By 2026, an outboard carrying this technology is no longer just an older engine. It is a relic from a chapter in marine history that ended abruptly. A cheap price on a used example can be tempting, especially to someone who remembers the marketing pitch, but not the aftermath. That combination of outdated complexity and fading support is a classic recipe for regret. Number 4. Budget 20 to 30. Horsepower off-brand, outboards from unverified manufacturers. Spend enough time scrolling through online marketplaces and you will see them. Brand new 20 horsepower or 30 horsepower outboards for prices that barely seem real. Shiny paint, vague brand names, spec sheets that read like copies of older Japanese engines. For someone building a small skiff or trying to keep costs low on a cabin boat, the temptation is obvious. On day one, some of these engines start easily and push a light hull around just fine. But as the hours add up, small cracks in the picture begin to appear. Castings sometimes show porous spots. Carburetors use soft metals and gaskets that do not respond well to marine fuel. Fasteners corrode quickly. Recoil starters, shift linkages, and throttle components feel loose after only a season or two. When something fails, the real problem shows up. There is no established dealer network. There is no nearby parts counter that can order an impeller or a float bowl gasket. Technical diagrams may be incomplete or obviously copied from another manufacturer's design. Mechanics hesitate to work on them because they cannot stand behind a repair if the replacement part might take months to arrive or might never fit correctly. In 2026, these engines will likely be even more common, as more small importers and private labels try to fill the low-cost niche. A tiny percentage of them will probably serve their owners well enough. Many more will leave someone staring at a broken part, searching the internet for help that never arrives. When a few $100s saved at the moment of purchase turns into a total lack of support after a minor failure, that bargain does not feel like a bargain anymore. Number 3. Lightweight. 115 to 150. Horsepower. 4-stroke. Outboards with minimal internal castings. There is real appeal in shaving weight off the transom. A lighter motor lets a small hull jump onto plane faster, ride higher, and respond more crisply to throttle changes. Manufacturers know this, and at various points they have pushed hard to advertise the lightest 115 horsepower or 150 horsepower 4-stroke in their class. The question that matters is simple. Where did that weight come from? In some model years and across more than one brand, weight savings were achieved by slimming down midsections, thinning internal bracing, shrinking the size of gear cases, and using less material around mounting points. For a while, everything looked good. Owners enjoyed fuel savings and improved handling, and early hours did not reveal much downside. The problems often show up later, after thousands of wave impacts and countless stress cycles. A midsection that flexed more than expected begins to crack. Engine mounts show signs of tearing or elongation. Gear cases that looked elegantly slim now struggle with bearing wear or gear tooth damage. Corrosion bites faster into thinner metal, especially in warm, salty environments. By the time those symptoms appear, many engines have already changed hands. A second or third owner may not know that the particular model they own was built during a period when weight reduction pushed the limits of long-term durability. They only know that their motor, which still starts and runs strong, now needs expensive structural work because the supporting pieces have aged out early. In 2026, the lightweight craze of past years will be old enough that its compromises are fully exposed. Engines that once won comparison tests for being the lightest in their horsepower class may now be the ones most likely to need major non-powerhead repairs. For some owners, discovering that trade-off after the purchase will be the exact moment their admiration turns into regret. Number 2. High-hour former rental or fleet 4-stroke motors sold as bargains. Every boat buyer knows the feeling of seeing a big motor at a small price. a 200 horsepower, 4-stroke for less than what some people pay for a much smaller engine. A seller who explains that it came from a rental operation or a tour company, but insists it was maintained perfectly. The cowling looks freshly painted. The decals are new. Compression numbers sound reassuring. What those numbers do not show is how that engine spent its life. Fleet outboards rarely sit idle. They run day after day with few breaks, often at the same cruise setting for hours at a time. They are shifted into gear thousands of times more than a private engine might see. They hit sandbars, drag in shallow water, and get overheated by people who are not emotionally invested in their long-term health. Even when oil changes and basic service are handled on schedule, mechanical parts still accumulate fatigue. Bearings feel the constant load cycles. Timing chains or belts live their whole existence in the tension that most private motors only experience on long road trips. Gear sets in the lower unit hit the same patch of tooth mesh over and over for years. By the time those engines arrive on the used market, many have passed through deep internal wear without obvious external clues. A compression test might still look acceptable. A quick run on a hose cannot reveal the subtle noises that show up after an hour of real load. Buyers often do not get to see that side of the motor until they have already paid for it. In 2026, the pool of used fleet outboards will include many motors that have lived entire working lives on charter boats, rental pontoons, and patrol vessels. Some may still offer a few good seasons to a private owner. Others will start presenting expensive problems almost immediately. The difficulty, from the outside looking in, is knowing which is which. And that uncertainty, combined with the allure of a steal, is exactly how regret is born. Number 1. Large offshore outboards, with known midsection or exhaust housing corrosion in the 200 to 300 horsepower class. These engines are the backbone of serious offshore fishing, water taxi routes, and coastal patrol work. 200 horsepower, 250 horsepower, 300 horsepower, and beyond. When they are healthy, they feel unstoppable. They lift heavy hulls, crush head seas, and sound like confidence itself at 3,500 revolutions per minute. The weakness, in certain models and years across more than one manufacturer, lurks in the midsection and inner exhaust passages. Hot exhaust gases, saltwater spray, and constant vibration meet in the same confined space. If materials, coatings, or drainage are not absolutely correct, corrosion begins to eat from the inside. At first, it is just a blemish where no one can see it. After enough hours, it becomes a pathway. The early clues are easy to dismiss. An exhaust tone that seems a little more hollow than before. A faint rattle at idle that goes away with a touch of throttle. Slightly lowered water pressure readings that no one bothers to investigate. Then, one day, a serious leak or a sudden overheat finally forces someone to take the cowling off and start checking. The estimate that follows can be shocking. Midsection replacements, exhaust housing rebuilds, and related labor on a big offshore motor quickly climb into numbers that make people question whether it is wise to repair at all. In some cases, the total is close to what a good used engine would cost. In others, it competes with the value of the hull itself. In 2026, many of the large offshore 4-strokes and late-generation 2-strokes that fall into this risk window will be right in the age band where midsection and exhaust corrosion reaches a critical point. A buyer who sees the shine of the cowling and recognizes a prestigious brand may think they are getting a deal of a lifetime. Without a detailed inspection and knowledge of specific problem year ranges, they may actually be buying into the most expensive surprise they will ever encounter in boating. That is why this list exists. Not to label whole brands as good or bad, but to highlight combinations of design, age, and real-world use that tend to turn into regret long after the ink on a bill of sale has dried. Buying the wrong engine costs real money and real weekends. But learning what to look for? That's free. If you've learned something today, hit like. And if you've got a question about a motor not on this list, Drop it in the comments. Subscribe if you want to see the next episode. We're digging into how to tell if a used motor still has years of life left, or if it's one season away from disaster.